Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. The ACLU's Border Litigation Project has released a report saying Customs and Border Protection has a history of neglecting and abusing minors in its custody. The conclusions are based on more than 30,000 pages of documents obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request. KPBS Frontiers reporter Jean Guerrero has more.
The report looked at the treatment of more than 100 unaccompanied minors between 2009 and 2014. About 80% reported food and water being withheld or spoiled. About a quarter of them reported physical abuse, including sexual assault and beatings by Border Patrol agents. More than half reported verbal abuse. One teenage mother said her child became ill from drinking spoiled milk in Border Patrol custody. Her child was given medicine at a hospital, but back in custody, she says the agents, quote, took the medicine from my child away. She went about 2 days without medicine, end quote. Joshua Wilson of the National Border Patrol Council in San Diego defends the agency.
Border Patrol agents are mothers, their fathers, aunts, uncles, and in some cases grandparents. I can tell you that Border Patrol agents take the care and custody of children very seriously.
A spokesman for U.S. Customs and Border Protection called the report, quote, unfounded and baseless, end quote, containing false accusations. The agency also said an independent investigation had previously found the reported claims unsubstantiated. The spokesman added that the agency has made improvements since. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
After years of back and forth, parking laws for RVs in Santee are changing. The City Council voted to update the ordinance after people complained that oversized vehicles parked on streets were safety hazards. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman has more.
In Santee, an RV has to be moved every 72 hours, but an old ordinance did not say how far they actually had to be moved.
If everybody adhered to the spirit of the law all the time, we wouldn't have these issues, but that's just not the reality of it.
New rules say the oversized vehicles have to be moved at least 300 feet every 3 days.
We're tightening it up so that you can't just move your RV a foot and say, well, I moved it.
Updated regulations also prohibit RVs from parking within 50 feet of an intersection. Santee Vice Mayor Rob McNellis hopes the new rules will force RVs off of neighborhood streets.
Just driving around, our fire department can't get through some of the streets safely. Kids can't be seen in the streets or even on the sidewalks.
Some disagree with the safety aspect, saying people in Santee are used to dealing with RVs.
Honestly, until something happens, I don't think that's going to be an argument. I really don't. Until somebody runs into one and then it, blows up.
Keith Brown works at an RV dealership in Santee. He says potential owners are concerned about campers fitting in their driveways.
There's a lot of people measuring. You'd be surprised. I maybe have a couple people a week in here measuring to make sure it'll fit.
With limited storage options for RVs in Santee, the council also changed zoning laws to make storage facilities easier to be built. McNellis says there will be a grace period for enforcement of the new regulations. Normally, the sheriff's substation in Santee is responsible for ticketing or towing violators, but the city is looking into having code compliance officers handle that. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Some high-priority bike projects across San Diego County are facing delays under a proposed budget for SANDAG, the countywide transportation agency. One of the delayed projects is along 4th and 5th Avenues between Hillcrest and downtown San Diego. SANDAG has plans for a physical barrier here, shielding cyclists from moving cars. Judy Tintor of the nonprofit Bike San Diego says the many delays have been frustrating.
I don't understand what the delays are. There is, I think, a political will issue, and SANDAG needs to step up and push these projects, both for the climate action plan and just for people getting around like me and a lot of other people who want to get around by bicycle.
SANDAG has spent $73 million on its regional bikeways program, but just 7.5 miles have been open to the public. The SANDAG board is due to vote on the budget tomorrow morning. Health officials in Africa are in a race against another Ebola outbreak. But unlike the last deadly outbreak 4 years ago, a proven vaccine has been mobilized. San Diego is one of the world's major centers for Ebola vaccine and treatment research. KPBS health reporter Susan Murphy met up with scientists in La Jolla on a mission to find a cure.
As health officials in Congo begin rolling out an Ebola vaccination campaign, researchers in La Jolla are studying samples from survivors of the last Ebola outbreak 4 years ago. They're seeking broader vaccines and treatments that would also work on other strains of the highly contagious disease.
The worry is that there are actually 4 other viruses in that genus, and even more in the larger family, and they all cause disease that look like Ebola virus. We don't know which one will break out next.
Erica Ullman Sapphire is a professor at Scripps Research Institute, where she works in a lab named after her. She also directs a consortium of the world's top Ebola researchers from 43 labs on 5 continents. She says figuring out what antibodies an Ebola survivor made in response to the infection is key in treating new infections.
These are everything we've measured about the antibody. Every spot is a different variable.
Her team of researchers dressed in lab coats are mapping the virus's molecules. She says if you know how they're built, you can figure out how to defeat them.
What we're doing here in San Diego is looking at the molecular nature of the virus. We take pictures of its key molecules to understand where it's vulnerable and where we might target a therapy.
She says think of it like military intelligence photos.
So when our military intelligence has photos that tell us what chair in what room in what house to target, because that's where the bad guy is sitting. That's what we're trying to do for this virus, to figure out exactly where we'd want to hit it with a vaccine or a therapeutic.
Ullman Sapphire says she's not surprised that there's another Ebola outbreak because the virus circulates frequently and quietly. And she says there's evidence of many people being exposed to Ebola but not getting sick.
And so we need to track these people now to figure out where the virus is, how they're getting exposed, how these people are not getting sick, because there's something particular about their immune system or their exposure. And we need to understand more about the biology of this virus so that we can prevent an outbreak instead of always trying to put out a fire.
She's hopeful the outbreak will be knocked down quickly with the vaccine, but she says there are still concerns.
The danger is that new cases have emerged in a city of 1 million people.
For Ullman Sapphire and her team, the Congo outbreak and the potential of other deadly related viral outbreaks has brought a renewed urgency to find a cure. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
Former San Diego County District Attorney Bonnie Dumanis is one of 5 candidates vying for the District 4 seat on the San Diego County Board of Supervisors. Current Supervisor Ron Roberts is terming out after more than 20 years. KPBS North County reporter Allison St. John talked to Dumanis about her campaign.
Bonnie Dumanis, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure, thank you.
So many of the seats on the Board of Supervisors, including Ron Roberts, the seat that you're running for, have been on the board for more than 20 years. And I think some people see you as being the establishment candidate who would continue the status quo. Do you think that's accurate?
I don't think there's anyone that knows me that would say that. I've been involved for the last 35 years as a junior clerk typist, a deputy DA, went on the bench, ran for election on the bench and started the first drug court here in San Diego and went on to the Superior Court. As the DA, I have been touted nationwide and statewide for all the innovative programs we have, from outreach into the community to behavioral health, veterans court, bringing people into the office, even like the defense attorneys come in for meetings once a quarter, and the tribal communities come in once a quarter. So I think anyone that says that doesn't know me. I'm like a round peg in a square hole. I just don't fit into any category.
Can you give us some examples of how you think the status quo on the county board should change?
Well, I think we've all been talking about spending the reserves, and I'm really proposing that we spend reserves $100 million a year for 4 years so that we can give loans to affordable housing folks, because they need a local match and they can't get the state and federal and even private dollars to make it happen. And it's been happening here all over the county through the Housing Commission, and we have some projects ready to go. So I'm concerned about the homelessness, mental health, substance abuse, all the issues that law enforcement had to deal with that shouldn't be in their laps. It should be all of us in making sure the social services are there and making sure that we do everything we can to give them a hand to get, on their own.
What about the fiscal responsibility that the current supervisors are basically always arguing is so important of keeping a very large reserve?
Well, I think that they took us out of bankruptcy and put us in a place right now where we have money to put into all of these programs. And I want to make sure that the homeless are taken care of, dignity and respect. The housing first model is what's proven. Mental health is a real challenge because of all the people that have issues with mental health, and that's how they get involved in the criminal justice system, as well as substance abuse. But being fiscally responsible, I want to let you know that I am doing this job without taking a salary, without taking any benefits, because this is my passion, and I stepped out of the DA role to be in this position because I was diagnosed with cancer, had cancer treatment, radiation, and time to think about what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And instead of having people in the system and helping them out, I'd like to have people before they get into the system and give them a chance to have what they're entitled to.
So you've been the district attorney for almost 15 years now, and the sheriff's department, you've had a very good working relationship with them. Recent reports suggest that there have been some unacceptable levels of deaths and suicides in the county jails. Is that something that you would do something about if elected?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the sheriff has done a lot of things that were recommended already. But I would put money in the budget to make sure that there's more mental health providers in the jails, and then have them step out into an area where, like a step-down facility, so that they continue that medication. Because those that are mentally ill, often, when you have them on a regular medication, they will stop that behavior, but once you get them outside, they will discontinue because they feel good.
Let's just talk about sanctuary cities, because the current board has just voted to support or to endorse President Trump's suit against the state of California for the sanctuary state laws. Where do you stand on that? Very controversial issue.
I issued a statement saying I asked them not to get involved. And the reason for that is, on either side, it's a federal versus state issue. It's not a local issue. With these critical issues of homelessness, lack of affordable homes or homes that are affordable, and these mental health issues and substance abuse, we got to get down to it here. And any diversion from that is a diversion.
Okay, now recreational marijuana is now legal in California. The County Board of Supervisors has issued a moratorium basically on all new commercial cannabis operations in the backcountry. What would you be looking for to actually consider regulating commercial cannabis operations in the county?
Well, I've visited Urban Leaf, and I see how they have really done a lot of the regulation. Obviously, they're in the city of San Diego. I would bring all the stakeholders to the table, because I'm not wearing the district attorney hat, and I am open to all ideas. I just want to make sure our kids are safe and our streets are safe. But if we can come up with a plan that will work, I'm more than open to that.
Bonnie Dumanis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Ken Marlborough is also running to represent District 4 on the County Board of Supervisors. He's a retired deputy fire chief with the City of San Diego Fire Rescue Department. He spoke with KPBS reporter Jade Hyman about why he's running.
Well, I appreciate you joining us today. First question, you've talked about spending more of the county's reserve funds, which is about $2 billion. But the current supervisors have said keeping all the money in reserve keeps the county on solid financial ground, especially as pension costs are continuing to balloon. What specific projects would you fund?
Great question. And as the question stated, I said some of the money, because I understand reserves, and you have to have some reserves. The problem that we have is the county does not have a plan for our tax dollars, and I believe that we need to place one in there. Our number one priority is, of course, the reduction of our homeless population and affordable housing, and those are two items that I think we could use some of those reserves.
All right. Now, what would you do as supervisor to address the county's housing shortage?
Well, I believe there's two areas. One, we have the homeless population, where I believe in housing first. and we need to increase housing throughout the region. And then I have family members who need affordable housing, and so we need workforce housing as well. The key to that, again, is producing more housing units. The county has two things that are important. They own a lot of property, both in the incorporated areas and unincorporated areas. And I believe if we take a look at how their operations are, we can kind of reduce some of the use in the incorporated areas by combining them in different services and using that property to produce affordable housing.
And a report released by the nonprofit group Disability Rights California investigated the high number of suicides and suicide attempts in San Diego County jails. One of the report's findings is that the county, quote, needs to step up to provide the resources and accountability necessary to solve what are serious, long-standing problems. What do you think the Board of Supervisors' role should be in addressing suicide, deaths, and mental illness in county jails?
So the first thing is that the county's one of their biggest responsibilities, access to health and human services. And so if we can do a better job at doing that, we can keep those individuals who have mental illness situations or substance abuse problems out of the jails to begin with. That's the first thing. Second of all, suicides in the jail is a non-starter for me, and I believe that we must make sure, and working with the sheriff, to ensure that we can minimize that problem.
And the current Board of Supervisors approved a moratorium on nearly all new marijuana dispensaries and farms, and existing marijuana businesses are required to close by 2022. Is that something you'd work to change if elected on the board?
Yes, I would. You know, I believe in democracy. The people of California have spoken. They have voted to have use of cannabis. And so I think as a responsible leader, we have to framework that to make sure that does happen. But we must do it in a safe way. I understand that there are people who don't want to use it, and we must make sure that they're safe as well as those who do want to use that. The problem with not doing anything is that we're going to have a lot of illegal use in the county, which is going to, again, push our law enforcement into that area where I'd rather have them protecting and serving our communities.
The County Board of Supervisors voted to support President Trump's lawsuit against California's sanctuary state laws. Now, those who voted for it said they did it to protect public safety. Are you concerned that the new sanctuary state laws make San Diego less safe?
No, I'm not concerned about that. Our sanctuary laws, we're still as safe as we always have been. The problem with what the board has done is they filed this brief, the amicus brief, which is only to be used for appeal process, not the existing suit that the federal government is doing. But they also missed the date for the suit to be filed. So to me, that was just a publicity stunt that they did. Now listen, immigration is important, and I would like to see a reasonable immigration plan put in place. But what I don't want to see is our law enforcement having to take on more responsibilities. They are now subject matter experts on substance abuse, mental illness, and possibly cannabis use now, illegal cannabis use, that since we're not making any decisions, and now immigration. We can't afford to do that. We need to take action on this.
All right, and you've served on planning commissions, town councils, and advisory boards. What do you think you can do as a county supervisor that you couldn't accomplish in those previous positions?
Well, I've accomplished a lot in those previous areas, but here's what I've learned. I've been doing that for almost 12 years now. And in my meetings, what I have, that someone from the mayor's office shows up, someone from the council district shows up, but I don't get anybody from the county that shows up. And that's where I'm going to make a change, because I really believe in outreach. And when you do community work, that is the primary thing that you do. And as a county supervisor, I will be doing a lot of outreach into my communities.
All right. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
The California judge who presided over a high-profile sexual assault case involving a Stanford University student is fighting a recall vote. Critics say Judge Aaron Persky went too easy on Brock Turner. Associated Press reporter Terry Che has the story.
Yes, you will find them around Santa Clara County.
Judge Aaron Persky is fighting for his job. He faces a recall campaign by critics who say he treated sexual assault too lightly when he sentenced Stanford University student Brock Turner 2 years ago.
I also understand the passion that drives the recall. While I think that passion is genuine, I think the mechanism that has been chosen, which is judicial recall, is misguided. I just think it's the wrong outlet for that desire for change.
In an interview with the Associated Press, Persky said he's fighting the recall to protect judicial independence.
Think about the next time, if you're in a courtroom, what do you expect of that judge? Do you expect that judge to put their finger to the wind and test public opinion in your case? Or do you expect that judge to focus on the facts of your case, on the law that applies?
Well, that's Judge Persky and Mr. Turner.
Stanford law professor Michelle Dauber launched the recall effort in 2016 after Persky sentenced the student-athlete to probation and 6 months in county jail. He pointed to Turner's clean criminal record and the probation department's recommendation. Prosecutors had argued for 6 years in state prison.
Judge Persky has failed women in a very significant way, and the voters are going to hold him accountable for that on June 5th.
Women are playthings for the boys!
The case sparked outrage at Stanford and around the country after the victim's courtroom statement about the assault and its aftermath went viral. The 22-year-old woman was intoxicated and unconscious when she was assaulted on the Stanford campus outside a fraternity party in 2015.
Many eyes around the country are going to be on Santa Clara County as a model for how to respond to bias against women in the legal system.
In response to the Turner case, Governor Jerry Brown signed legislation that would require longer sentences in state prison for defendants convicted of assaulting unconscious victims. Despite the backlash, Persky says he has no regrets about how he handled the Turner case and has no plans to quit his job.
And I'm in this fight for the broader message, which is let's protect our criminal justice system. Let's keep politics out of the courtroom.
If the campaign is successful, Persky would be the first California judge to be recalled in 86 years. Terry Che, Associated Press, Los Altos Hills, California.
And for all of our election coverage, including our handy voter guide, go to kpbs.org/election.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, President Trump calls off the planned historic summit with North Korea, accusing the regime of open hostility. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Low clouds and light showers across the county, plus a dip in temperatures until early next week. Justin Pavic has the full forecast.
Well, we're still stuck in this pattern, the marine layer playing a pretty big role, and that's led to lots of low clouds, even some drizzle at times toward the immediate shoreline. Temperatures have been pretty close to normal unless you take into account the interior. In that case, we've been several degrees below normal. Could we see some changes for the weekend? It's a big weekend coming up, Memorial Day holiday weekend, so I'll explore that coming up. Notice, though, on the satellite radar, well, you don't notice that much because it's relatively quiet aside from the low clouds. So again, we talk about La Jolla, Oceanside, and then out east toward Ramona. It's a big difference here as we see the low clouds and also the lower ceilings that have led to a couple of flight delays around the Bay Area and L.A. so far today. Those are slow to break, so that limits the amount of sunshine that we receive. And then it comes back in, kind of the opposite process going on. You see everything break toward the late day and then toward the late evening. Again, the influence starts to kick back in. So a little early mist, otherwise a cloudy night. We drop down to 61. Oceanside 57. The interior, though, is dry. In Mount Laguna, we're talking the 40s. Borrego Springs down to 63 degrees, if you call that down to. I mean, we're only climbing into the 60s out toward Chula Vista, heading into tomorrow. Oceanside 69. Morning clouds, late day sunny breaks, and an ample sunshine here out over the interior. Mount Laguna popping into the upper 50s. But notice that dip in the jet stream. That'll keep us a little on the stormy side here as we go down the line. When I say stormy, I'm not talking about wet weather, rather just unsettled and coolish. But notice at the coast, we start to see some subtle changes here early next week. The flow begins to break down a bit. So clouds will break and perhaps it will be just a little bit warmer. Inland also, notice the change starting to take shape by Sunday, Memorial Day Monday. Still a cloudy start, then some sunshine and beautiful on Tuesday. Mountainous locations, cool the next couple of days, but rebounding temperatures by early week. And well, the deserts will be blistering hot as we venture into Monday and also into Tuesday as the sunshine will be quite widespread. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Pavic. Back over to you, Ebony.
San Diego researchers are using audio recordings to help gauge how fast glaciers are melting. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson has details.
Audio recordings of melting ice could help scientists at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography understand how quickly glaciers melt. This is the Hans Glacier and Horsund Fjord north of Sweden, and the noise you hear is tiny air bubbles popping as the ice hits seawater and starts to melt. Now that noise is helping researchers understand how quickly melting actually happens. Grant Dean is a member of the team of researchers studying the ice. He says recording the sound as the glacier hits seawater reveals clues about how quickly the ice is turning into water. He spoke on KPBS Midday Edition.
We have almost enough information to do that for one glacier, but for this to be really interesting and useful, it has to work for many glaciers. So this year we're going to study at least 4 of them.
Dean hopes to correlate those findings with data on how quickly glaciers retreat. The research appears in the journal Geophysical Research Letters. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.